There's probably youth groups, maybe choirs or football teams or whatever that youth group may be, that say to themselves, yeah, ours was the thing, ours was the... And good on them. I'm sure they have great memories, but I do feel as if our little group was different.
I so wish I'd kept a diary. It's like there's a million things happened every day. A million things.
I had no idea what the fuck was happening. I just knew I wanted more of it.
Glasgow was going through, torturous change. We used to call it post-industrial city there because all the industries were collapsing, the coal shipbuilding and things. And it was halfway through being developed, so Glasgow was like, some parts were just like a wasteland.
It was grim in Glasgow in them days. It was pretty... And Bridgeton wasn't the nicest part of the town.
If you watch that sinking feeling now, you can see it looks like, London after the Second World War. And it wasn't as if we were going out of our way to find these images. We were just, on the streets, say, OK, guys, you go there and I'll shoot it here. And that's just what the city looked like.
There was auditions to be held at the Dolphin Arts Centre, which was in Bridgeton. I didn't know where Bridgeton was or where the Dolphin Arts Centre. But for me, I don't know why, but I wanted to know what about this.
When I started secondary school, I joined the school choir. Don't ask me why, but I joined the school choir, and I joined a choir outside the school that the music teacher ran, and they were based in a place called the Dolphin. Well, they named it the Dolphin Centre. They were based in this community centre type place in one wee room. And eventually they got the whole place. They got the whole of what was the Dolphin Centre, the old part of the building, and the newer part with the hall and the rooms up the stair.
Me and Dougie Sanikin, we went to a local secondary school local to the Dolphin Arts Centre. And the only extracurricular activities, for what I remember, was football or gang fighting. Now, me and Dougie weren't into any of those things. But one of the teachers had heard of the Dolphin Arts Centre, which was just round the corner, but, So me and Dougie went down there, and we took like a couple of ducks to water, actually. We just loved it. So we were in Dolphin Arts Centre constantly from that moment on.
The Dolphin used to keep bees, so there's beehives on top of the Dolphin Centre. And Puff and I were in this room. I don't know what we were doing, just messing about or something. We heard this almighty screaming. And Peter Scholes, we ran out, and down the corridor, we could see Peter Scholes running down, ripping his clothes off. And he was naked, and he was covered in bees. It was unbelievable. It was hilarious. We were absolutely pissing ourselves laughing. It was like, what? This place is mental.
It was really weird because there was a whole bunch of folk running about the Dolphin Centre. Youngsters, my age, teenagers, strange bunch, we tried to keep well away from them.
Me and Dougie were there from 9 in the morning till 9 at night, 6 days a week, So we were just completely embedded in the place.
The coffin room was another room. It was a small room with a coffin in it. I remember there was school kids they came down as well, and somebody was taking them about, and somebody says, why don't you go up and dive into the coffin, hide in the coffin, and then when the kids come up, open the coffin. So I'm in this coffin, in the coffin room. You could hear these kids coming up the stairs, and the doors open, and that comes out the coffin, screaming their heads off. It was a great place, the Dolphin Centre, because you could actually get away with stuff.
And then we started getting involved in different kind of classes in the arts centre, and that led on to the youth theatre.
There was this guy called John Baraldi, and he was an American guy.
John Baraldi, well, he was a big American guy, you know. I mean, that was unusual in itself. I'd never met any American dudes, you know.
John Baraldi was, I mean, it was off the scale for me. It was like an American accent in Brigton. It was like, whoa.
John Baraldi.
John was...
just this American, he seemed quite... I suppose quite exotic. I'd never met anyone from America before.
And he reminded me instantly of Cat Stevens. And I really fancied Cat Stevens.
He was quite patient and calm, given that he was surrounded by some pretty feral kids.
We would push our luck so far, and then he would maybe, you know, like have a wee word in your ear kind of thing to calm you down.
I thought he was quite scary.
I think John got annoyed at me once because I was farting about, like, with a character, and he didn't like the way it was going. That was the only time he ever shouted at me. No, he didn't shout at me. He just was like, stop that.
Sanny, fucking stop that.
I'm not saying I felt intimidated, but I certainly did what I was told, you know.
I thought he was really enigmatic and beautiful and mysterious and funny and irreverent.
He was a very cool guy, but I don't mean that in the sense that there was any front there, because he was very accessible too.
He seemed to be able to get the best out of people. You know, he seemed to be able to draw things out of people that they probably didn't know that they were capable of.
There was no such thing as stupid ideas. John quite encouraged you to sort of come out with, you know, sort of a free flow of thought kind of thing, and he wasn't hypercritical of even the silliest sort of thing.
He didn't parent us. He wasn't particularly in charge of us. Or he never gave us the impression that he was in charge of us, but he steered us kind of practically without you knowing, really. He'd just go, oh, what do you think about this? And you'd go, aye, and then you think it was your idea.
Everybody had a space. Nobody was a star. Everybody was a star.
We were a creative group. It is something John Baraldi has always brought from the people he's worked with, whether it's Glasgow Youth Theatre, Cumbernauld Youth Theatre, On Your Bike Theatre Company, or his students at East 15. He is a gift for bringing theatre out of people and bringing people together.
You can do anything, was his message. Imagine that for us. That's what he said. And everything that he did and all his actions, you are not limited. You can do anything you want.
It's only now when I look back that I realise that he was probably not as old as I thought he was, but to us, he was the adult. He was the one that had all the responsibility.
And even though he was maybe 10 years older than us, he was still sort of, you know, part of who we were, you know. He was one of the gang, as it were, you know. And that was always a good thing. But he was in charge. He knew what he was talking about. We were clueless, I think. I certainly was.
I kind of thought he must have been mad, taking it all on. And what I specifically remember was us all going to Denmark. Now, how many of us would there have been? About 20 odd? And there was only John and Christine, in charge of all that, which possibly explains why we nearly missed the plane, because we were all in the carry-out shop at the time.
We'll never know, will we? But because I don't know if he'll ever talk about it, but how John Baraldi ended up in fucking Glasgow at that time and what he was doing directly before it.
Sit down, let me tell you. It all started...
I was born in California, raised in Connecticut. I went to the UK in 1968, educated at university level in Manchester, where I did drama and English, and then I did a postgraduate diploma at the University of Manchester in theatre. And then after graduation, my first job was as assistant manager of the Chesterfield Civic Theatre, and that was my first proper job ever, anywhere. Working in Derbyshire during the miners' strike, I was learning about Derbyshire. I was learning about the miners. I was learning about the culture and the history and the politics of the UK from a local level. And so theatre was a way of explaining to me what was going on, as well as sharing that with an audience. When I went to London, there were lots of people who were overtly political, but I felt it was like a bunch of posturing. These were middle-class people who had no idea what was going on, for instance, in the mining areas. A lot of them weren't working class. They were, I thought, middle-class poseurs. And I got pissed off with that. And a job came up in Glasgow, starting a new art centre. And I thought, ooh, that sounds interesting. Starting a new art centre in the east end of Glasgow, how gritty could you get? And I thought, yeah, that sounds exciting. I had begun at that stage to think, yeah, this is the way to work. You use theatre as a way of exploring rather than theatre as a way of presenting your own ideas. It was you were the vehicle for something bigger, and therefore, hopefully, that the audience would take something from it. Now, interestingly, people said, what do you want to go to Glasgow for? And all these English people who were committed left-wingers had this attitude about Glasgow, and I thought, wait a minute, if you were really committed about politics and theatre, wasn't Glasgow the best place to go, you know? Because when I arrived there, Glasgow at that time was regarded, East End of Glasgow was regarded as Europe's largest area of urban deprivation, multiple urban deprivation.
Multiple social deprivation.
The Dolphin had been a nurse's training college. And so there's this old Victorian building, and it had a variety of buildings, including a gymnasium and some other buildings. And I thought, ooh, gymnasium, theatre. It'd be quite exciting with that. I did have a wee stage at one end, which the choir performed on. And I thought, okay, we could rearrange things with that to make it a more flexible, big space. But in order to do any theatre, you had to have people who wanted to do theatre. And so my first October, I think the half term, we organised a project for secondary school kids who wanted to do an intensive week of drama. And it was great because they came in on Monday and finished on the Friday, and they spent 8 hours a day for 5 days creating stuff from scratch. And it was different from what was being done elsewhere. And therefore, some kids really, really liked it. And so the idea of extending it into a youth theatre, start meeting then on Friday nights, because people said, oh, can we do more of this? I said, yeah, why not? We'll meet on Friday nights.
It was lifeblood to me. Everything was about Friday night. Everything was about the Glasgow Youth Theatre. Suddenly I had plans. I was going to be doing something.
Glasgow had a really interesting programme of international youth exchanges and youth clubs, school groups, did all sorts of trips abroad in the summer. And somebody said to me that there was a couple of countries that had offered opportunities for youth exchanges, and they didn't have any takers. And me, because I worked for community education, would I be interested in taking a group? I thought, oh, that would be interesting, to create a piece of theatre to go from Glasgow to Copenhagen.
So we were all saving up like mad to go to Denmark, and we were putting on a play, and we didn't really have a clue what we were going to do.
God, what do we do? Because I didn't know if the Danes would speak English. And I thought, oh, we want to do something that is visual. And I thought, okay, And what does a Glaswegian think? God, it rains a lot.
John got umbrellas from a factory and some material, so we decided to make the play about umbrellas.
So we ended up having all these dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of umbrellas.
We made a whole dragon out of umbrellas and whole characters out of umbrellas.
We had umbrellas giving birth.
A baby umbrella happened.
We constructed things like cars, like a Fred Flintstone type car, with open umbrellas being the wheels and us inside it.
Everything you could possibly do with an umbrella and a kazoo was done.
It was an exercise in making theatre that was for somebody else. It was not about you. It was how we were going to make a piece of theatre that somebody else that we didn't know yet would appreciate.
Denmark was a fantastic experience. It was life-changing for me.
That would have been my first time abroad at all, and first holiday without parents. So I have to say I wasn't exactly very responsible, being drunk and getting sunstroke and stuff.
It was an interesting time. But we had a hard time doing the work we were doing, because despite the fact there was an interest in community theatre, I think it was felt that that community didn't include Bridgeton. So despite the fact that the Glasgow Eastern Area Renewal was there to fund and renovate, rejuvenate, bring new life to the East End of Glasgow, that didn't extend to arts practitioners or theatre practitioners like ourselves. And I remember we had applied for some money to the Arts Council. We were getting turned down for commissioning of artists, of playwrights and things. And I remember we didn't get the money. And I went to a reception being held at the Third Eye Centre by the Arts Council, the Scottish Arts Council. And there was lots of free wine and drink. And I took a look at the table with all this wine on it. And I thought, for fuck's sake, they've spent more money on free wine for this reception than we were asking for to help commission some work. For instance, we had Ballyrambere do a residency at the Dolphin. Now, Ballyrambere is an amazing company, internationally regarded. They were performing at the Opera House. And I think we were the only people doing outreach, and we had them in the East End of Glasgow doing residency, workshops in workshop stuff in schools. And I had to fund it myself. And I thought, what a load of hypocrisy. It was like their idea of theatre. It wasn't really democratic that way. And certainly because I wasn't Scottish. And certainly because this was the East End of Glasgow. Our faces didn't fit.
The Black Bull of Norway, written by Carl McDougall. This show was long. It had different strands. I was given a major role within it. You are playing Sonny, he said to me. Me? Yes, you're going to play a young alcoholic. So the themes were really important. That was the other thing about it. And you didn't really get this at the time when you were kids, but what he was dealing with, the themes that he was dealing with were really quite important, relevant, groundbreaking for kids to be dealing with.
We would invite people in to come and do stuff with us. And the youth theatre ended up getting selected to go and do a performance for a week at the Royal Court in London.
We were putting on a show in the Black Bull in Norway. We were going to fucking London. He's got us round in a circle and he's going, this is what we're doing. This is Carl McDougall. He's a playwright. He's going to write this. And we are going to go on tour to blah, blah, blah. So your parents need to know this. We're going to London. We're going to the Royal Court.
London, going to the Royal Court, the theatre upstairs. We took a piper and a dancer down with us, and we had Cayley in Sloane Square.
Sloane Square. You talk about Chelsea, you talk about, you know, posh, exciting, avant-garde Chelsea.
And all the punks were hanging about at that time as well. That's when punk was getting really big. And it was Sloane Square they used to hang out in. And we came out of the theatre marching across the road with a piper.
It was it was street theatre. It was stuff out in Sloane Square. And so we did things like
putting the haggis, tossing the kipper.
Tossing the kipper.
A welly throwing event. What the fuck was that?
Shot put in the welly or something like that.
And an iron brew drinking competition. And I don't think iron brew was a thing in England at that point, you know. So we had these guys with bowler hats and pinstripe suits trying to drink a bottle of iron brew.
Tanking it like that in like 30 seconds and being really proud of themselves with all this stuff coming out their noses and all that, and out their mouths. And the prize was a bottle of iron brew.
Sloane Square was ringed with people.
We stopped the traffic, you know, and we had all sorts. We had the punks, we had the business people joining in, we had the tourists. It was absolutely brilliant.
Kids from Glasgow making Sloane Square Glasgow for half an hour. And I remember some guy said he had lived in Sloane Square for most of his life, and he had never met a lot of his neighbours that he met that day. It was tremendous. And he was knocked out that a bunch of kids from Glasgow had given him something that he had never had before in the community he lived in. Now, that to me was pretty important. Had nothing to do with a piece of theatre, but it had everything to do with the theatre process. We wanted to do a piece of theatre involving music and singing. And so somebody had a friend who was in a first year RSAMD who had a voice.
I remember Sheena Easton.
BBC television program was looking for some new talent, and they wanted a young singer. And we thought, Sheena's got a great voice.
I just remember her coming in, because she was Grace's pal, and singing that amazing Jessie, and us going,
Esther Ranson's going to love this. She comes from a mining village. She's got this fantastic voice. She looks good. Wow, she's perfect.
I was listening to Sheena Easton sing that song, and we're going, what? And she's going, well.
And of course, Scotland being Scotland, Sheena didn't believe that she could do it. And I had to say, look, you are exactly what they're looking for. And she almost didn't go to the audition.
Alistair Gray, he turned up one Friday night.
I think Alistair Gray was working on a Manpower Services Commission grant because he was an unemployed artist. We ended up doing some stuff with Jim Kelman and Tom Leonard. There was a guy around the corner who taught secondary school who had written the Gilly Peace song. And we started doing some folk stuff and poetry stuff. And Liz Lockhead, we would bring in 784, Wildcat, we had all sorts of stuff happening.
And then, of course, there was Eddie Boyd. Eddie Boyd, when he came along, we all just clicked again, you know. And that led to us doing one of the best shows I've ever been involved in, certainly with the Youth Theatre, a play called The Old Alliance that I believe Eddie wrote for the BBC, knowing that it wouldn't get televised because there was so many sweary words in it.
It was Eddie really naughty in terms of the way Eddie writes. And people said, you lot could do it.
I always remember the scene with Rab getting hung, and I was one of the soldiers at the back that had to pull the rope to, and it was a harness, you know, with the rope around his neck kind of thing. Oh, it's a bit scary, that.
Set in 13th century Scotland or something like that, and France.
With crumhorns, sackbuts and hurdy-gurdies and tambours and...
Danny Benson, his face when he saw the costume he had to wear. And basically it was chamois leather, chamois leather, sewn together. And it just looked like a pair of Speedos that he had to put on. He's like, I'm not wearing that. But he had to wear that. That was his costume. And looked a bit interesting with permed hair.
With the youth theatre, if they were only going to perform to friends and family, it was going to be cosy theatre. But if you're going on tour, the effort is to do something different.
We used to do tours every year. We'd do a 2-week tour of the Highlands and the Islands.
Going on tour with a show was just the most phenomenal experience. Going away in a minibus. And I don't remember it being smelly, but it must have been. I don't remember that. It must have been minging. We're all in this minibus and we were only allowed a certain size of suitcase in it because there was no room. And going to all these community centres and sleeping on the floor in all these community centres. And thinking this is the life. This is absolutely brilliant.
People would actually end up going to parts of Scotland they hadn't seen before. So they're young people from Glasgow who had never been to the Highlands or Islands. So that straight away was like, oh.
Just for me, seeing all the different parts in Scotland was quite incredible, just, because I hadn't been outside Glasgow, I don't think. Maybe down to Saltcoats, but...
I'd left school and I'd got a job, and it must have been one of the later tours. But I couldn't get the time off work because it was something, the tour was something like 3 weeks long, and I could only get 2 weeks holiday. So I chucked my job to go on tour with the youth theatre, and my ma went mental. She threw a pan across, like a pot or a pan or something like that across the kitchen. She said, "You gave up your job, you must be joking." So that was how much the youth theatre meant to me, It was, I just thought I couldn't let them go on tour and me not be there. It wouldn't be right, kind of thing.
I think people matured. People were given a responsibility because people had to do everything. This wasn't just going on stage and having a bit of fun. This was hard slog.
May I say for yourself as well, Jerry, for me and you, it was actually hard work because it was me and you that loaded the van of an evening. Everybody else, they would just be swanning around, kind of enjoying themselves, and the lights, give a light, and it would be, bring in this, bring in that. But it was me and you that was actually doing all the hard work, all the hard graft.
I remember putting the sets up, the get in and get out of the sets, and everybody just kind of working together and knowing what bits they were doing and stuff, and that all kind of working like clockwork and nobody being lazy. I don't remember anybody not pulling their weight.
They all done their bit, apart from Mr. Sanikin, who could be particularly lazy, but that's Dougie, what can you say? That's part of his character.
I'd like to bring in Mr. Sanikin on this one when it came to dismantling stages and getting things set up, and he was just never around, and he'd come out with all these weird kind of costumes and wigs and start singing, and I'm looking at him thinking, yeah.
You were doing a summer tour of Scotland with the Auld Alliance, and Adrian, who worked on the movies, costume and designer, she and I shared the driving in the minibus for a couple of weeks.
Puff and I were on the front seat, and we're driving, we're talking away to Bill, and the next minute Bill's driving, nodding off, going to sleep and all that. But he had one eye open, he was driving with one eye open kind of thing, He's like, "Bill!" He's going, "Oh, what is it?" And he was like,
it was real kind of people time, I wasn't kind of trying to exploit you guys or drag you into movies or anything. We were just kind of hanging out in a minibus, for a few weeks. And I was able to kind of look at you, see your world and see and you were all mad teenagers. You were all 16, 17 years old and got up to endless mischief.
Do you remember the time we went to Ullapool and it was John's friends? Somebody Urquhart? Robert Urquhart,
yeah.
Ullapool. We had a great time in Ullapool in the Cayley Place pub. We did lots of daft songs and we did games with punters, and we did. I'm sure I remember Sanny doing a really shit mind reading act. But we had a brilliant laugh, you know, and we were based there for a couple of days, and we were doing shows elsewhere, I think. Then we had to leave, you know, which was really sad because we'd had a brilliant time. So we said cheerio to people, thanks to Jean and all this. And we were waiting on the bus for John to come because we were heading off. And he came on with a guy for the Cayley Place and said something like...
Right, bastards, you know. There's all these fucking mugs.
I remember John lining us up when we were going on the bus. He's like, have you got any mugs, you know?
That's right.
If anybody here's got any mugs, just give us them back, and nothing else is going to be said. Just give us the mugs back.
And I was like, I've only got one, you know, And then, of course, everybody, it was like a Spartacus moment, really. Everybody just producing mugs for everywhere.
And I believe he collected about 6 plastic bags full of mugs. I think we left the Cayley Place with 2 mugs or something like that.
A nice mug, that'll do me. And I honestly didn't know anybody else had stole one.
But it was really it was embarrassing, but it was really funny as well.
So that was a bit embarrassing for him. Mm-hmm. I would have thought, you know,
because we said we didn't, but Maggie's got a set of 6 still through there.
I didn't steal a mug, by the way. Didn't steal a mug. I got a jug for the hotel, though. A jug and a nice bowl. But he never asked for a jug or a bowl.
But his friends, you know, they took us in and on good faith. And here we had 6 mugs each. So...
Daft kids from Glasgow.
Uh-huh.
But, you know, it could have been worse.
We
could have taken the whiskey.
6 bags of mugs. It was embarrassing. And he gave us a big lecture. He bawled at us. He gave us such a hard time.
I remember him actually saying, that's it, we're going home.
That's it. That's the end of the tour. We're going home.
And I remember us driving along the road and everybody really kind of, oh shit, this is for real, you know.
We were heading home halfway through the tour, so he was going to cancel all the other shows, and potentially that was the end of the youth theatre, possibly. But it didn't. We didn't get home because the bus driver got really hacked off that he had to drive us home, and he's like, hang on, this is my fucking holiday. I'm not going back to Glasgow, I'm fucking staying. So we carried on the tour. So thanks to the bus driver, I can't remember his name, but thanks to the bus driver, we got away with stealing 60 mugs. God knows how many there were, but there was a lot of mugs. You know, a lot of mugs. But that was a great show and a great tour, and we had such a laugh on that, you know.
Nobody got a certificate from it. Nobody got an exam. Nobody got a gold medal, a bronze medal. Nobody got a grade. Nobody got a something which was a guarantee or a promise that they're going to get a job or was going to help them get into university or college or whatever. There was nothing that said they're going to be famous from it. There was nothing that said that anybody who was rich and famous or an agent was going to come and see it and whisk them away. I think they did it because, oh, this is great fun.
The overriding memory is bellyache laughing.
It was always just we just laughed. We laughed and laughed and laughed.
Splitting your sides. We were all fucking roaring.
It was the getting together. It was the camaraderie. It was the things we had in common. We had a bloody good laugh.
We were always laughing.
Yeah.
Yeah. People were so funny. Eichmann was just hysterical.
Yeah.
Sanny.
The spoon. Oh my, that's right. The spoon. He did that for years. I used to do it. It became my party trick. I'm like, do you know how to do this?
There was natural comedians.
Yeah.
And it was just a lot
Alan
of fun.
Puffy was, again, superb.
One for the album was a largely improvised production. I think before we did that, we actually got a script. It was growing up in Glasgow during the Second World War or something it was called.
I remember being in the youth theatre and John going, look, I've asked for all these scripts from all these writers and they've come and they're all rubbish.
And then it was decided, no, we're not going to do it. So we had to quickly put together one for the album, and that was put together through improvisation.
And we're running out of time because we've got this tour starts in however many weeks. He went, so what do you think we should all do? And we're like, oh, don't know. He went, well, you just need to write your own. We're like, hey, we can't do that. We can't. He went, yeah, you can. And that's what we did. He just made us improvise. He went, let's make it. But I don't know who came up with the idea about making it a history, a story through time, from when you're being born to when you have a baby. I don't know whose idea it was. And it doesn't matter whose idea it was because it was everybody's idea. And then he just went, right, there's a scene, that's a scene, go and improvise. Everybody go and improvise. And what was the joy about the youth theatre was that people wouldn't go, I want the best part. People would go, you're brilliant at that. You do that bit. That was partly came from the people who were there and partly the environment that was created by John Baraldi to enable that to happen. Because he never made it about acting. He never made it about acting.
We never auditioned anybody for anything, right? Nobody was selected. Never. You were never auditioned to join. We did whatever we could do with whoever wanted to commit to it.
I remember in one for the album, because we only had, I think, the one, we all wore the dark kind of blue T-shirts. I don't know if we had two to do as the whole 2-week tour.
You were obviously getting a bit sweaty after the first week, and we'd stopped off at a laundrette in a little town in the Borders.
We'd had to wash all the costumes and they hadn't dried.
And we were hanging out the van trying to get these T-shirts dried.
Try and get them dry.
We eventually pulled all the clothes out of the dryers and we hung them out in the minibus and we dried them on the way.
And I think mine's expanded to about a size 48 chest or something. Because they were still damp. We had to do the show that night.
It was, I suppose, it was my little magic time when I just relaxed as a filmmaker and just enjoyed the world of the theatre, you know, the touring thing. We would move on every day to a different place, set up. It was like that lovely carnival thing where you turn up and take over the church hall, and you guys were putting the set up and everything and getting things sorted out for a night's performance. You'd have the show and then you go apeshit overnight, and then we'd get into the minibus and go somewhere else.
I was thinking about what I was going to talk about the other night, and there's stuff that's in there somewhere, you know, and it's just a case of dragging it out. But I'm at a loss for words at points, you know, because I'm trying to remember that far back, especially when you're under the influence of night nurse and things like that, you know. It's pretty difficult, you know.
And I always remember when we were getting a bit excitable that John would come round with medication.
We used to try and line you up at night and give you some night nurse to make you go to sleep.
Right, do I line up and get your night nurse? It really was like the cuckoo's nest. It was the medication time, you know.
John Baraldi got us into drugs.
The style when we workshop together is very much a style I associate with the director John Baraldi, who I worked with in a number of projects. Was quite physical. There was a lot of mime and clowning and different sort of abilities, not just acting. So in the workshops, we had a lot of fun. We did really strange things.
We did a lot of interesting work, physical work, vocal work, before we ever got to acting stuff. And part of it was to create confidence, part of it which was to create openness, part of it which was courage.
You used to start off the sessions doing all these trust games where you'd fall backwards and just hope the person caught you and everything. And everybody always did. You know, I think it crossed a lot of people's minds not to, because it'd be a laugh, but everybody always did.
One girl I remember, she was called Big Jules. I think she was 16 or 17, and she was very well endowed. And she was one of these girls, because of the size of her bosoms, spent a lot of time doing this. to be embarrassed, the fact that you've got breasts, you know, and it must be terrible for young girls. But also too, it created I think, a lack of confidence in other ways, right? So we're doing lots of physical work, but she felt very self-conscious about doing anything physical. But we're doing tons of stuff. People throwing themselves in, rolling over and being held up by people and caught by people, and you had to dive. And then we were doing these somersault things. And Jules would, because the group was really, really supportive, because everybody's going through the same thing. I remember one day, finally, she did this forward somersault, but running somersault. And she stood up there. Wow, she never put it. Now, to my mind, it's fuck all to do with theatre, but it has everything to do with theatre. It's about the process whereby she realized she could do something that had been a barrier to her, and she felt really confident, and therefore I think it released other things. Now that to me is what the process is about. It's a workshop. It's a preparation for the work. And to my mind, that was a tremendous... I'll never forget it. I'll never forget it. Crazy, isn't it?
Remember the, what was it, the apple pie, you know, which was just come out of a warm-up exercise or a drama game or something like that. We came up with this ridiculous thing called the apple pie. It was Gordon, wasn't it? Gordon Sinclair that came up with the apple pie, which looked nothing like an apple pie. All wee daft things like that. That was a big part of the fun of the whole thing, you know.
Right, excellent. Thank you. I wasn't recording. You're going to have to fall over again. I'm only kidding.
Is there a method? Yeah, there is a method. Which goes back to what I said about one of my memories in terms of getting people prepared to work, getting people open, getting people confident, getting people expressive, getting people to be responsive to each other, getting people to be collaborative, getting people to respond to ideas, and getting people to be open.
Got on the train one Friday night and went over and encountered John Baraldi. Well, it wasn't an encounter, he was a sweet guy, so he just, welcomed me.
He was looking for somebody to help him write a script that he had an idea for, because he had never written a feature script, which was character driven. He'd done documentaries. And somebody from the Arts Council suggested, well, in Glasgow there might be these kids, and there might be somebody that works with them.
I told him roughly what I wanted to do. I wanted to get to, work with actors and see them, develop all that stuff. He said, well, yeah, just come out, hang out, and talk to the boys and girls whenever you want. I'm kind of backward guy, so I would just turn up on a Friday, sit at the back, and John would wrangle all you guys into, we're doing this, we're doing an improv here, we're doing this, and this is the setup, and then there would be a rehearsal for the summer, for the touring thing, and I just sat there and at the back for I don't know how many weeks, quite a few weeks. That's how kind of undeveloped I was, and then eventually John said, look, you're going to have to talk to these people, it's getting a bit weird. They're saying, who is this guy sitting up the back?
What's that, masked man? Say it with me.
We really have to, you got to introduce. They'll be desperate. They're desperate to know what you're doing, and they'll be excited about it and all that. So what he said, next week you're going to talk to them, and believe it or not, the next week I bottled out. I used to get a train from Partick over to Bridgeton, and I got part of this, the next stop was Charing Cross, and I got off the train at Charing Cross. I thought, I can't do this. So I sat on the platform at Charing Cross and imagined, you know, my life if I had stayed on the train, and my life if I hadn't stayed on the train, and I actually plucked up the wherewithal to get on, you know, the next train, and went and did it, and that was it.
He had appeared one Friday night and was introduced to us as Bill Forsyth. He's a filmmaker and he wants to make a film. That we all sort of went, aye, right. But he kept on coming down, and he was involved with the rehearsals for the Old Alliance, and eventually when we went on tour, he came along as a driver.
Bill had came in with the idea of actually doing a film. We didn't know, but he had this wee idea in his mind to start with, and he was just kind of putting it together in his mind at the time. Gregory's Girl to start with.
And Bill was talking about that. I thought, that's a great idea. Gregory's Girl. Football. I said, Bill, give him the ideas and see what they... And the group improvised.
There was a lot of the stuff that I recall came through improvisation. And Bill obviously picked up on a lot of that. Because, you know, we were talented in our own way and we all came up with good ideas.
They were helping write a script. Bill was realising his ideas could be realised by a group of young people, and he was getting the point of view of young people rather than his idea. And so therefore there was this wonderful coming together. And Bill was empowered because, yeah, he could write characters, he could write a feature script.
I was trying to get money out of the British Film Institute at that point. And it took me about 2 years of meetings, and we did little video rehearsal things to send to them, and eventually they turned me down. After I had wound up the people at the Youth Theatre that we were going to do this, we're going to make this movie, and then finally they had a meeting, they had a production meeting where they allot the money. And I remember at the time I was looking for £29,000 to make Greggy's Girl on 16mm. That was the plan. So they knocked that back.
Because he couldn't get money for Gregory's Girl for the BFI, he came back and said, listen, I can't get money for Gregory's Girl, but why don't we make a film anyway?
Maybe it was a kind of trade-off, because I had got so much from, you know, I'd learned so much and was learning so much from just being allowed to be around young performers, that we had created this, you know, this whole bunch of energy about making a film, and then suddenly we weren't going to make a film after all. So I felt like kind of, I felt duty bound to kind of deliver in some way or other. And also I was pissed at the BFI for turning me down anyway, so I had a kind of determination as well to kind of show the world that we could get by without them. And so we came up with the idea of that sinking feeling. And we made it very, very quickly. We shot that in 3 weeks for, as you know, no money at all. As you know, the Youth Theatre, there was this big plumber's warehouse just round the corner.
We found out that I worked in the Plumbers Merchants, Thomas Graham's in Bridgeton. And so he asked me, he said, look, what do you think your boss would think about us filming, you know, like in the factory kind of thing? Do you fancy asking? Kind of thing. And I was like, me ask the boss? You're joking. I was just like a wee apprentice. I said, well, I'll go and ask, you know. And like, he says, look, here's my number. Give him my number, get him to phone me. Or if you can get his number, I'll phone him. They were great about it. They said, yeah, why not?
Paddy Higgs, and the production manager, she organised. We obviously, it's a heist where they steal the sinks and all that, and she organised with the people at Thomas Graham, the warehouse people. Can you imagine it? I mean, if you wanted to create a heist, you could say, we're a film company, can we come in over the weekend and shoot here? And you could get your heist going then. But they were, God bless them, they bought it when Paddy said, I've got this bunch of kids and this guy who wants to make a film, and it's about people stealing sinks. Can we come and use your warehouse over the weekend and shoot all these scenes? And he said, oh, okay. And they let us in there. I remember we went in on Friday about 4 o'clock. All the workers were coming out, and we went in there. And we had the factory the Friday night, the Saturday night, Sunday. And I remember we came out there like dead rats on the Monday morning when the workers were coming back, and we were crawling out, having shot the whole weekend in that place. The idea for that sinking feeling as a subject came directly from the youth theatre, from the young folk. I remember hanging out with, I could name the people, but I wouldn't name them, a couple of boys at the youth theatre, and they were talking the local gossip about how it wasn't them, but some other local people had broken into a bowling club, and all that they'd come away with was a trophy, a silver trophy, with the bowling club name on it and all that, and how difficult it was to move this loot. It led me to the idea of that sinking feeling, which was based on kids, breaking into a factory and stealing a very useless object, and trying to dispose of it.
And then we all worked on a lot of the scenes. He would give us ideas. So a lot of the scenes that he came up with, we had worked on way before, even for Comfort and Joy. And maybe not that so much, but
Gregory's Girl.
Which
I think you definitely must be proud of that as well. You're thinking it's Bill. I know had his script, but as Maggie says, because I remember you and Ike at that scene commence the dancing, and because Jerry and Ike were doing it, I was just sort of mulling along, and next minute Bill comes out, oh, I like that. That's now in the movie, and I think that's a classic to think it was these two guys that pulled that together.
I remember the very first time we were shooting in the Dolphin Arts Centre for that sinking feeling, and we were using the Dolphin as the office space for the factory, if you remember, because you were the night watchman, and we were filming these scenes in the Dolphin Arts Centre where the youth theatre is. And I remember once we were filming the two guys dressed up as the decoys for your character, coming through a door, and I said to Mike, okay, we've got that shot now, we've got a shot over here of and I was doing the shots off the script, and Mike said hold it, because he'd spent half an hour late in this thing. He said hold on. He said, does anyone else come through that door? I said, oh, later on, yeah. He says, well, we'll shoot that now. I said, why? He says, so I don't have to come back and bloody light it again for another half hour, This is great. That's a terrific idea, And that's how you made films. So we shot all the shots using that door, and then we relit this door, and then we shot all the shots, people coming and going through that door. That was my education in feature filmmaking, rapidly, expanding. The abiding miracle is you kind of wrangling that film into shape that weekend when we went into the warehouse, the sink warehouse, and you had talked them into giving us their whole warehouse and all the electricity, whatever we needed, from Friday till Monday morning.
Yes,
and we just in there all weekend.
I know, and that's when bloody Eichmann and
is that when he disappeared?
John disappeared, yes. Well, that was when they went into the pub.
And we were all kind of hiding away, really, just drinking so we could go out and have a drink. And I remember a few people from the production company finding us and just sending us back out and get up here and do your job. And
I just lost them. I couldn't find them. I was round every pub in Bridgeton.
God.
And strangely enough, at the BAFTA Awards this year, I bumped into a woman who said, you're the reason I'm in film, and it's because I owned the pub where
they were hiding. It's a funny thing that it was only 3 years after I first kind of got on that train and plucked up courage to go to the youth theatre to meet some actors. I was directing Burt Lancaster in a movie. A journalist would say, it was a journalist that asked me that, what's it like working with actors like Burt Lancaster as opposed to the kids at the youth theatre? I said there was absolutely no difference, because what I learned from the kids at the youth theatre about what a performer wanted and needed was exactly the same as the things that Burt Lancaster needed from a director. They just want a sense of a reason as to why they're out there saying these words. They don't need... This is the other thing, that before I worked with actors, one of the things that inhibited me was because I thought naively that you had to teach actors how to act as a director, you know. I hadn't figured that actors come with a kind of bag of goods, you know. They've got skills, they've got their own temperaments, they've got their own ideas. I thought you had to kind of coach them into a performance. And it was such a relief to learn, even within days of working with the kids in the youth theatre, that wasn't the case, that the whole thing was a collaboration. And it was a huge kind of load of work right off my mind, you know. As you know, we did that Sinking Feeling on a very low budget, and Mick Coulter had said that he would commit, he was the cameraman, he would commit to doing it only if I could produce the film stock, you know, to prove that I had the wherewithal to make the film. I wasn't going to pay him or anything, but he said, okay, because people like Mick, they had to take time off real work, you know, being hired out and things. So he said, okay, you get me 10 rolls, 16mm colour film, show me it, and then you can count me up on board, you know. So somehow I did that. I got Fujifilm, because Fujifilm was cheaper than Eastman colour at the time. The Fujifilm was just coming, they were making an effort to get known and all that. So I scratched enough together to buy the right number of rolls, and sure, it arrived at the house, and I got Mick, he insisted on coming up and examining it. He didn't trust me when I said, I've got the film. He said, I'll come up. So Mick Coulter was on board. Anyway, we shot the movie with these 10 rolls of film. And it was very like, we'd kept short ends, you know, when you shoot maybe 300 feet and then you want to change because you're doing a longer dialogue scene, so you take the 100 feet out and recan it, right? So we had little short ends around, and we were down, it was the last day we were shooting, and it was a little scene with Puff's mother and Puff's sister, and they were two onlookers who were talking about the great robbery that had happened. And they were saying, you know, the mother was saying she's going to put a padlock on her bathroom door to make sure none of her things go missing and all that. And she says, you know, I'm sure they had a helicopter on the roof of that factory to get these things away. So we were filming that, and I got one take out of them that was great, and then another take, and halfway through that take, the film ran out in the camera. And Mick said, okay, that's it. All the film's gone. That's it. So we all went home.
The films were, well, you know, they speak for themselves. They're now part of Scottish cinema history.
We were helping invest in the future of the Scottish film industry without realising it. Now, this is the bizarre thing. And it just occurred to me. Had it not been for the Royal Court in London inviting us down to do something in London, the fucking Scottish arts scheme world would have ignored us. It took validation from London, from the English national, the English theatre company, which ran the Royal Court, to suggest that our work was good before any fucker in Scotland would take interest in us. And then suddenly, ooh, people from television, people from the Arts Council. Now that's the thing that annoys me, looking at it in retrospect. I think Scotland is really good at destroying people's confidence, saying, no, you can't do that. No. You're not the sort of person who do that. No, it's not going to work. And we were saying, yes, you can. Yes, you can. And the group had a 30-minute piece of television which they created.
Hey, look, there's a camera over there. A camera. John. Hey, do you think they'll make us a movie? I want to go into the movies. I think we'll get paid for it. It's the STV, is it though? I'll be on the telly, my mum will see me. Hi, Mum!
Something else, Mike Bolan, who worked at the BBC, and they did this, they had this show going called Something Else, and it was about different youth groups up and down the country. And they, for one of the things, they used the youth theatre. Unfortunately, I was away working at the time, so I wasn't involved with this. But I saw the TV programme and things like that. And I suppose it was a bit like Why Don't You? In that respect, it was just getting together and doing really silly things and having a laugh.
Something Else. That was fabulous.
Yeah.
That was great fun.
At that point, the Scottish Youth Theatre were really noses were out of joint, because I think Sinking Feeling first of all, and then Something Else came along, and I think it was, a wee bit of a rivalry.
The BBC turned up and went, here's a budget, what do you want to put in your TV show? We're like, oh well, what about this, what about that? You can hire 2 bands. Aye, all right, we'll get the Skids.
And we got to meet
The Revillos.
and the Skids.
The Skids. Which was...
And what was the name of that guy that was in Big Country?
Oh, Stuart Adamson, who was part of the Skids. Oh,
Got
yes.
to meet him. He was just lovely. He was such a nice guy.
Yeah, digging up again. I thought Faith Fife was really nice as well. If that's what we're going to do here now.
Yeah, he was lovely.
He
I
was,
really liked meeting him. That was
because
nice.
Jobson was a bit stuck.
I can't say that.
Can we not know?
And Gordon doing the Look at Me. Charles Atlas.
Charles
thing.
Atlas, yeah.
That was funny.
Dear Charles Atlas, can you help me? I am very weak, and all I have in place of muscles is a yellow streak. Kids are stronger, grannies also, but my worst disgrace is that the ladies on the beach kick sand into my face.
Would you believe it though? After 40 years, I've just finally fucking realised if it hadn't been for the validation of the royal court, nobody would have noticed us.
The BBC come down to youth theatre because they were looking for youths to be in a play for today, just a boys' game. So they had me, Puff, Ike, and maybe another couple more. So we had to go to Greenock. And Ike got a really good part in it. He played this guy, this absolute nutter, and they dyed his hair red, sort of ginger kind of thing. So it looked twice as mad as what he looked anyway. And we were filming the docks in Greenock, and Ike never turned up. We were sitting about this bothy, and the BBC are going, oh, we can't find this Billy Greenlees. You know, it's like, does anybody know where Billy is? And it's like, we're all like that. No. But we actually knew fine well where he was. And like, he was in every scene. So they needed him. They'd hired the docks, the containers and stuff like that. The big things that lift the containers and all that. They'd hired them, the drivers. It was costing them thousands. A lot of money. But they couldn't do anything without Ike. And we knew he was lining up outside the Apollo to get and see a band, but nobody would grass him up, and we're sitting there, and like, eventually somebody said, I think he's at the Apollo. They had blue lights flashing up all the way up, police escort and all that, and eventually they got him just as they about to go into the Apollo and grabbed him out.
McCafferty! You're teasing! Come ahead, McQuillan.
But that was him. Didn't really care.
A few weeks or maybe even a month or two after we'd finished that sinking feeling. And I used to live up this little mews up in Park Circus in Glasgow, up a wee lane. And I'd been away because things were starting to happen by then. I was probably down in London trying to get something else going. And came back up the wee lane one dark night. And I looked up and it was like a cartoon. There was what was my kitchen window? There was a body shape kind of punched in it, arms and legs, and an old bed end leading up to it like a ladder. So I realised I'd had visitors, So I thought, okay, we'll take it nice and easy. So I opened the door and crept up. It could have been any time ago, but I wasn't expecting to find someone there. Got upstairs, put the lights on, looking about, anything. No, everything looked kind of normal. Found my way into the kitchen eventually, and the only anomalous thing was a raw onion, which was sitting on top of the cooker, with a huge bite out of it, and with little kind of trickles of tomato sauce on it. And I thought, now, who do I know that would eat a raw onion with tomato sauce on it? And very quickly we got to Eichmann, It took me a few days. I think Sani or Puff phoned me up because Eichmann had obviously confessed and was feeling guilty about it. He'd been out of his head on something, obviously. And eventually he decided to phone me up and just clear the air. So he phoned me up at some point and said, I'm really sorry, Bill. And I said, well, that's okay, but mind you, I was still missing a camera and a nice wee penknife. But his words were memorable. I said, well, that's fine, but what was it all about? He says, well, Bill, I think I was just seeking your attention. I said, well, you got it.
Well, after John left, John moved on to Cumbernauld Theatre, I think it was. And we had other people that ran the youth theatre. And obviously, because John was the guy that started us, and who we all worked with and went through the whole youth theatre process with, nobody else fitted.
I was really knackered doing all this with very little resources. You're having to find the resources for everything. I needed growth as well. I spent all my time worrying about other people's growth. And after 4 years and a bit, I thought, where's my growth? Just as members of the youth theatre grew and moved on to other things, where was what I was needing going to come from? Do you see what I mean? I didn't want to be a Mr. Chips. I needed to grow. I needed to find out what else I could do. Yeah. The day that I told everybody I was leaving. Wow, that was terrible. That was bad. That was shitty.
John was the youth theatre. John was the glue. He created the youth theatre and he created the atmosphere for it to flourish. And when he was gone,
remember, it's a Friday night, so it was, school weeks off or, the working weeks off for one or two of them. So it was playtime. And since, they came from different parts of town, they only really foregathered together on that Friday night. So there was an awful lot of energy and interchange and also the pub afterwards, which maybe we won't talk about.
Pubs mean a lot to every youngster, but to us, they were just amazing.
I got very drunk. I think it was the first time I'd ever been drunk because somebody had vodka and they were pouring me straight vodka. It was that funny lassie and Jules and Grace. Yeah, it was the older girls. And I didn't know I was drinking straight vodka because I just thought it was water. And I got very drunk and very sick, and then you had to clear it up.
Certainly drink was involved because there was a lot of drink involved in Glasgow Youth Theatre.
People think Glasgow Youth Theatre and all they talk about is alcohol.
That was just what our life was, you know. Not that we're alcoholics or anything, far from it. We couldn't afford to be, you know.
Everybody, well, most of these were all underage. And I used to get sent up to get the drinks. Well, they didn't have the money anyways. They'd send us up with their order. There was no money forthcoming. It was saying, "Oh, John, you're working and Jerry's working. I'll just have just a half pint and a half."
In fact, my first legal pint was bought for me in the doublet by Eichmann on that day before rehearsals. This was new to me, drinking before rehearsals. I could understand why when you actually look at the play, gas.
Gas.
I did one for the album and gas. My favourite was one for the album.
I don't know what it was about.
Gas by Jörg Kaiser is a rather esoteric German expressionist play. Why we were doing it, I've no idea.
Gas was a pile of pish.
The problem with gas was it was very contrived. John left the youth theatre. This guy Greg came and took over John's position, and Greg just wasn't John.
Sometimes you go with a director's opinion and just trust them, and this is way over my head, but it must be good. I don't understand it, but it must be good though. And but here it wasn't.
He was a very nice man, but he did not know how to relate, I think, to us and who we were and what we were about. And he did come in thinking it's about acting and and putting on this production and whatever. And he never got the humour.
And nobody came. Honestly, we had tiny audiences.
And although we're doing a play that I don't think anybody particularly liked or understood, well, I didn't, there was still enough going on that we saw it to the end. We didn't disappoint. Mm-hmm. Well, maybe when people came to see it, they might be disappointed, but at least we turned up.
The best night of the tour was probably Broadford in the Isle of Skye, because we set up in this hall in Broadford and nobody came. Nobody at all. So we took the set down and went to the pub.
It was a mental play. We all hated it.
The gas tour, I think I remember the drinking more than anything else, possibly the drugs, but the fact was it was an absolute ball. In fact, if it hadn't been for the play Gas, it would have been absolutely perfect.
What can you say? It was as if it was the final nail in the coffin for the youth theatre.
The play's irrelevant. It was the thing we had, almost brotherhood we had, very close bonding. I was with these guys for a couple of months, but that couple of months set up friendships that have lasted nearly 40 years.
Glasgow Youth Theatre produced a lot of really interesting theatre makers, filmmakers, writers. We never intended to do that. We didn't have the pretensions of the Scottish Youth Theatre, which was going to present the next generation of theatre makers in Scotland. You know, it happened by accident.
I had no experience of working with any kind of actor, so whatever I learned or intuited about acting, I got it from the young people at the youth theatre, and they gave me everything that I needed as a director.
No, they weren't RSAMD. They weren't trained actors. But I dare say that some of the young apprentices that came along, well, people that had never formally done anything in theatre, they've had decent careers out of it, in one way or another, as musicians, designers, technicians, actors, writers.
If it wasn't for John turning up at the youth theatre, I don't believe that any of that would have happened in Glasgow. In Glasgow. Never mind just the East End, but it was all down to JB.
It was an incredible, quite unique experience, I think, and I'm really, really privileged to have been part of it.
I'm ever so happy to have been part of it, and that only increases with time.
The best thing I'd ever done, without a doubt.
And it was a good all good friendships. Even now, I see anybody from that era, you just feel that immediate friendliness.
Bond, yeah.
It's nice.
I think it is. You know, it's been a long time. We've all done our own thing. We've all gone our own ways, but we have certainly, and maybe because we're getting older, I feel now we're coming back full circle, which I think is great because, you do appreciate it. You know, you're only here for so many years, and I think to have the same company way back then, nothing's really changed, you know. And as Maggie says, we probably haven't seen each other for a number of years, but you just pick up from where you left off.
Click right back.
Yeah. Which is, I think that just shows you what John kind of instilled in us back then as well. You know.
Oh.
I know, I'm going to start crying now, yeah.
Working with the youth theatre, it gave me everything. It didn't just give me something, it just gave me everything that I needed to be a filmmaker. I don't remember learning anything more or other than I learned in the few years that I worked with the youth theatre.
I did try and kill myself at 13. So when I say, for me, meeting John Baroldi and becoming part of the Glasgow Youth Theatre was life-saving for me, I'm not being dramatic.
I do feel I have to say something about Big Ike, Billy Greenleys. Now, when 9 years ago, something like that, Billy passed away. I was with Billy near the end, and all Billy wanted to focus in on, because Billy was all about humour and all about laughter, as we all know, all he wanted to talk to me about was the youth theatre and filming. All he was interested in talking about, because he had to immerse himself in humour at that time. And that's what that period of time means. With regards to the sinking feeling, he said one of us has got to go down the plug hole first, as simple as that. You know, and I was like, well, you know, yeah, sure, man. I always knew, although I was in contact with people, yourselves or Rab or anybody, I always knew something would come round where people were going to be kind of, you know, and I'm sure that will keep happening till we're all down the plug hole.
Bingo's smashing, bingo's great, bingo's... What the fuck was that?
Fuckety jings.
Hello. Hey, how are you? How are you? Another scruff I found off the street. The thing is, though, the interesting thing.
You call them scruff.
The interesting thing is this, you know, that I tell people this is a rescue cat. What I don't tell people is she rescued me.
Couldn't you?